Hey everyone, welcome to a special edition of News You Can Use. And as many of you know, Canada released its federal budget just yesterday. And so many of you have been writing in, tweeting at us, asking us to break down the numbers. What does this mean for you, for the average person, in simple terms? Well, that's what we're going to do right now. And as we know, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, well, there were a lot of big new budget items in this budget. The big one that everybody's talking about is childcare. And of course, that's going to really affect a lot of young families across Canada and a lot of single parent households as well. So what is the new plan? Well, according to the new budget, the government wants to start a national childcare program that would essentially cost $10 a day. Now this program is similar to one that is already in Quebec, and essentially the government wants to model that right across the country. Now, it is going to take a few years to come into place. The government is anticipating a start date of about 2026, but it's also not going to be cheap. At this point, the budget is saying that this new program would cost taxpayers $30 billion over the next 5 years, and then $8.3 billion each year after that. That is something that we're going to continue to follow. The other big item that was in this budget is basically those big COVID-19 support programs. They're going to be extended. The programs that I'm talking about are the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy. Two big programs that a lot of businesses have been able to access to stay afloat. The government now wants to extend those programs until September. Now, those of you who might be using the Canada Recovery Benefit, for example, that program is going to be extended for another 12 weeks. But there is going to be a new program implemented to help long-term care homes. For any of you who have been following COVID-19, and I know so many of us have been, we know that the epicenter of this pandemic, this virus, has been long-term care homes. And the government now saying that they want to commit $3 billion over the next 5 years to ensure that long-term care homes are up to standard. Another big topic that everyone is talking about, real estate. Prices, not just in Toronto, but right across the country, have ballooned and they have skyrocketed. The government is saying that they now want to impose a 1% tax on the value of residential real estate that is vacant or underused and not owned by Canadians or permanent residents. Now, whether this is actually going to help deflate and bring down prices, that remains to be seen, but this is the only thing in the budget regarding real estate. Climate change, also a big deal. Nearly $9 billion has been dedicated to fight climate change over the next 5 years. Now, when it comes to individual communities, well, the government is now looking at spending $18 billion in new funds to support Indigenous communities. And essentially, where they want to spend those funds is in education, to promote entrepreneurship, improving health, and building better infrastructure for Indigenous communities right across Canada. The Black community also identified in this budget, saying that they want to spend $300 million to support Black-led charitable organizations over the next year. Now, these are basically the breakdowns of what you can expect over the course of the next year with this budget, but also know this, it does come with a pretty hefty price tag. In fact, this year alone, the federal government is expected to run a deficit of around $354 billion. So we broke it down for you, but I think it's time we dive a little bit deeper. In fact, we're going to be speaking with the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, Ahmed Hussen. Minister Hussen, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. I know it's been a very busy 24 hours for you and the government after presenting this massive budget. The big thing everybody's talking about is this national childcare plan. It is a game changer. So really talk to us, because we've told our viewers basically it would be a $10 a day on average cost for families. Talk to us. How quickly would this be implemented? And how for sure will this be implemented?
So number one, we're going to get it done. We are very serious. We're going to get it done. And the proof is in the amount of money that we're dedicating to this. $30 billion for 5 years, and then $9.2 billion every year after that in permanent money, in permanent investments. So this is the government of Canada saying, not only are we investing in a big way, We're providing stable, long-term, and predictable funding. We're not going to come in and then leave. This is real money, substantial money, dedicated to achieve two things: to achieve affordability. And we're very ambitious with our targets. Of course, we all know and everyone appreciates that you can't turn on a switch and achieve affordability overnight. It's going to take time. But even there, we're being very ambitious. So by the end of 2022, we will slash daycare fees by an average of 50%. And by the fifth year, we will bring it down to an average of $10 a day per child for daycare in Canada, for childcare. So you asked me, how do we know that this time it's going to get done? One, it's because the proof is in the money. We've dedicated significant long-term funding to get this done. Second, it's the environment. There is a deeper appreciation and support by Canadians for more affordable childcare because of the pandemic. You now have businesses, parents, more parents than ever before, presidents of banks, chambers of commerce, people who normally don't get involved, like the business community normally didn't call for affordable childcare. Now they are, because they've recognized that enabling the availability of affordable childcare will enable hundreds of thousands of women in Canada who now are locked out of the job market because of a lack of affordable childcare to rejoin the labor market. That will increase our GDP. It will increase our tax revenues. It will increase our productivity, and it will decrease our social services spending. The vision that we're implementing is to ensure that every child in Canada, regardless of their household income, regardless of the region that they're born into, has access to four things: affordable childcare, high quality early learning and childcare, inclusive and accessible childcare. This investment has to ensure that we have space in our affordable childcare system to deliver high quality childcare. And how do you do that? By recruiting and better training more early childhood educators, by making sure that the programming incorporates and accommodates Black, Indigenous, and racialized kids, children with disabilities. You see all those elements in the plan, and we're going to get it done.
So let's clarify a few things here, Minister.
Yes.
Is this program going to be open to everyone, no matter your income? Because there are some people in
Yes.
this country who make $250,000 a year. There are some people in this country who make only $35,000 a year.
So there's two schools of thought on that. And by the way, before we put this program together, I consulted even outside Canada. I spoke to countries that had implemented an affordable national system of childcare. There's two schools of thought. There's one group that says, treat all kids the same. You know how in our primary and secondary educational system and schools, we don't ask for income. We assume the cost, and every kid goes to the same classroom and has the same instruction and the same facilities. There's one school of thought that says, because we already do that for schools, let's do that for early learning and childcare, and that way it creates an equal society. There's another school of thought that says we should have a means-tested system where the folks who have the lowest income actually pay less than $10, and everyone else should pay $10.
So which school of thought are you going with?
There's a third school of thought that says lowest income should pay nothing. Some modest income should pay less than $10. Others should pay $10, and then it should be a graduated system where you pay more based on your income as well. So I think there is a lot of merit to all of the arguments. Fortunately for me, I don't have to make the decision by myself. We have to do this together with provinces and territories on the basic issues, bringing it down to $10, increasing the spaces, improving the quality, all of that we agree on.
You know, I'm located in Toronto. I've worked and lived across this country, but I can tell you, daycare costs in Southern Ontario, for example, right across Ontario, is just way too high. I don't know how young families are able to afford it. Now, you say $10 a day on average. That on average to me makes me a little bit nervous, because does that mean
a place like Ontario, which has some of the highest daycare costs in the country, does that mean that it's going to be $25 in Ontario and then it's like $5 in PEI?
No, that's not what it means.
Because I don't like funny math, Minister. I don't like funny math.
Absolutely, and I'll be very frank with you. What it means is it's taking into consideration that even in a place like Ontario, there's a lot of variation. There's a lot of variation. The childcare rates in Markham, Ontario, are very different from, for example, Kingston, Ontario, or Peterborough, right? So there's variation even amongst provinces. So when we say, for example, that we will reduce the fees on average by 50%, what we mean by that is the average childcare fees in Canada, which tends to be about $44. So we will reduce that by $22. We were already committed to bilateral funding from the federal government to the provinces and territories since 2017. We've been providing $400 million a year. And then last year, we provided an additional $625 million because of COVID.
Minister, your portfolio also covers families. And one of the big conversations that families across this country are having is about real estate costs. Like, let's get real here, because my goodness, any young person who wants to buy a home in Southern Ontario, any part of Ontario at this point, in Vancouver, the Lower Mainland, even in Halifax now, it's looking further and further out of reach. I looked at the budget, and a lot of people were asking your government to impose some form of measure to slow down the rise in prices. And all I could find, well, talk to me, because all I could see was a potential 1% tax on the value of residential real estate that is vacant or underused and not owned by Canadians or permanent residents. Minister, I don't know if that's going to be enough to slow down prices.
It will, first of all, the solution to enabling folks to access their dream of home ownership is not there isn't one solution. I think it takes a number of initiatives to get us there. That is one of them. I believe introducing a tax on vacant, unused, and underused.
But why only 1%? If we know that there are people who don't live in this country, but are actively buying up condos and homes and driving up prices, and people who actually live and work here can't even afford the homes in the cities and towns where they live, why not jack up that tax to like 10% to ensure that people who don't live here aren't going to be speculative and we're going to see this run up in prices? Like, why not actually impose a big barrier?
I think 1% on the value of the entire home is significant, but the reason why we're not implementing it until January is to actually talk to Canadians about how they feel about that tax. So we will be having those conversations, and we will be listening carefully. The second point about this is the first-time homebuyer incentive. This is a program that is working for folks outside of the GTA and Vancouver and so on, because it does allow the government of Canada to come in a shared equity mortgage situation with a first-time home buyer, family or individual, to help put down an amount of a value up to 10% of the value of the home as a down payment. One of the feedbacks we got was, great, but this program doesn't work for people in Toronto, Vancouver, Victoria, or the surrounding area, the GTA and so on. They said, that's not good enough, because our home prices are higher. And we promised in the last election to change that. And so one of the things we're doing now is we will make the first-time homebuyer incentive work to reflect the true market realities of the Greater Toronto area, including Toronto, same thing with Vancouver and the Greater Vancouver area and Victoria and so on. As the minister responsible for housing, one of the things that I've been trying to test out is to extend home ownership to marginalized communities. So recently, a few months ago, I announced a $40 million plan to provide home ownership stream. It was a one-time program just to test out the concept. And we were successful. We did a $40 million investment to enable hundreds of Black Canadian families to access home ownership. So now that has given me the incentive to try more. So I'm already thinking about other facilitative measures. Let me give you an example. Right now, there's a very traditional way of looking at you when you go in for a mortgage
Yes.
and you ask for a mortgage from a bank. They look at certain criteria. But some of those criteria are disadvantageous to racialized groups, especially Black and Indigenous peoples.
100%, because they look at your assets, they look at your credit rating,
But
and a
even
lot
the
of
way
times,
but even the way they examine credit, there's another way of looking at credit. So let's say you are a newly arrived skilled worker from Jamaica. Sorry, not newly arrived, but you're an immigrant from Jamaica. You've lived in Canada. Now you're a Canadian citizen, but you're not a multi-generational Canadian. So you're here for 20 years or 30 years. You don't have assets, but you've been paying your rent consistently without any problems for 30 years. Why should that not count for something?
that's a good question.
Right. So those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about. And I don't want to give too much away, but you're going to be hearing a lot soon about some of
Are we
those
going to hear about it first?
Well, sure, absolutely. Just reach out to my team and absolutely, I will reach out to you when we do that. The second one is one of the best ways to facilitate home ownership is to encourage more people to develop the capacity to become developers in marginalized communities.
When we look at some of our racialized communities, like the Indigenous community, $18 billion allocated over the next 5 years just for Indigenous communities to help with education, entrepreneurship, improving health, building better infrastructure. Seeing that number, it's a big number, it's a good number, especially since your government has adopted Truth and Reconciliation as a plank in this country. I look at funds specifically dedicated to the Black community. All I saw was $300 million, not billion, $300 million to support Black-led charitable organizations.
Well, no,
It seems like a
I think
small-
you're mistaken. It's more than that.
Okay.
Of course, it's not 18 billion. You're right, but it is much more than that.
Okay.
There's two competing priorities here. One is to name and dedicate money for Black Canadians, and I can go through the list of that. The other
Yeah.
one is also making sure that the massive amounts of investments that we make in the general programs also work for Black Canadians. I just spoke
So
about
explain that to me then. So the second round, all these big programs that we were just listing off and going
So, for
through.
example, the $350 million Emergency Community Support Fund that we introduced last year, 5.6% of that money went to Black Canadians. How do I know
Got
that?
it.
Because
Okay.
I demanded that accountability. That
Okay.
didn't happen before.
Right.
That's something new. So
Okay.
I demanded a proportionality or more of and a representation of the population. So both the receiving organizations and the receiving populations reflected the presence of Black Canadians in Canada.
I like that you talked about, the extra money going into the Black Entrepreneurship Fund. But a lot of these, these monies, when small Black businesses start, they're in the form of loans. And we keep hearing that Black entrepreneurs are asking for grants because they are already facing so many other systemic barriers.
Not all of
Why
them.
can't they?
The Black Entrepreneurship Program, it's not all grants, it's not all loans. There's a grant portion, and also the money that is set aside for enabling capacity for procurement. That will also help Black small and medium-sized businesses access government contracts and procurement and benefit from them. And that will invest in their capacity to do so. But we got to do more. But this is significant as well. Yeah.
Minister, I appreciate your time. It's a good conversation. You guys are doing a lot of good work. I appreciate it, and we're going to continue having this conversation, okay?
Absolutely. We'll continue again, and there's so much we need to talk about, and I'll keep coming back to you. This meeting is a hello. It's not a goodbye. So
Yes.
we'll have further meetings.